Check 1 2. Testing 1 2 3. Check 1 2. It's the sound check 210. Check 1 2. Testing. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Testing 1 2 3. Check 1 2. This is the mic check to 210. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. This is the mic check to room 210. Check 1 2. Testing. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Well, I understand to be just check 1 2. Is that any better? Check 1 2. Check the feed to 210. Check 1 2. Huh? Okay. So, I guess he has a presentation?
Yeah, he's coming in a
Okay.
few minutes.
Okay.
I'll do some housekeeping starting a few minutes after the meeting.
Okay. So he'll just stick it in and...
We probably want to plug into that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
you have
You want to plug in, or do you want to do it on PowerPoint? Either way.
I'll probably, well, it's a Mac, so why don't I, you guys have it hooked up for a Mac here, so I'll just take There we go.
Do you have a Mac dongle?
I just need to go grab some wine.
Take your time. Take your time. It's the second day, so we're not in the frenzy, but I'll copy this on. So you want to just use this instead of the Mac? Open folder to view files. No, I think we're okay.
Are you the tech guy? Yeah. Can you hook that up so I have a wireless? Okay. And I'll be back in 1 minute.
Okay. We'll take care of
Sorry, go ahead.
it. I think it's European form. Okay.
I'm going to wait 1 or 2 more minutes.
Okay.
1 minute. Bring me one, too. Do we want him mic'd? Right?
I don't know if he wants to use this mic or if he
Yeah,
plans
he'll
to
walk. He'll walk.
He'll walk.
Yeah. All right.
So once you get done, you can either mute it here or I'll mute it back there.
Because we don't want both of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be that, but you never know.
All right, let's get started. First of all, I'd like to begin by offering you my sincerest apologies. This is probably the most beautiful day in Chicago, and here you are, stuck. And so I've decided to cancel the conference. Oh, except for the speakers. The speakers have to stay and record their presentations. And then you can all go and watch them from wherever you are at some other time, and be back next week, because we'll call it the flipped conference. All right? All right. So a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. The network, as you may have noticed, times you out after 5 hours, and so you just have to re-log in with the Cali and the CaliCon password, CaliCon 13 password. If you lost something and somebody just turned in an earring.
Oh, I know who that is.
I hope that's it.
Yes.
I hope that's it. The magic of the internet. No, not really, huh? If you lose something, we've got a lost and found in, thanks. We've got a lost and found in room 170. If you think you've lost an iPad, you didn't. That's mine now. Presenters. The hats are coming in today. All the presenters get their own cool trucker Route 66 Cali hats. See Elmer for your way cool hat this afternoon. Hope they come in. The CSSIS breakfast meeting is tomorrow, Saturday at 8 a.m., oh my God, in room C50, that's the concourse. As you've now learned, C stands for basement. There will be another tech tour of Chicago-Kent's tech infrastructure. God, I gave thousands of those when I was the IT director here. Glad to pass that off. Okay, at the courtroom, which is right outside the first courtroom, there's two of them, at 10 a.m. We've decided to send the caterer home. All the meals tomorrow will be carrots. If you don't eat them at lunch, we'll have them for breakfast. If you don't eat them at breakfast, we'll have them for dinner. You will eat your carrots. I want to thank our sponsors for their support. I especially want to do a shout out to Tim Stanley, who is the checkbook behind the free law support. Really appreciate it, Tim. Tim, are you in the room? I have a feeling he was partying late last night. You must be all the teetotalers or something like that. Anybody from the beer hike here? Two. I knew it. And so I've got a little game for you to play in regards to supporting the sponsors. I want you to all visit a sponsor today and do a selfie with a sponsor. All right, so do a selfie with a sponsor and post it up to Facebook, Twitter, or something like that with the hashtag CaliCon. I know maybe not too many of you will do that, but it greatly helps us in keeping sponsors coming and becoming and participating in our community here. All right, housekeeping done. Any questions at this point? I always forget. I need to ask. Anybody have any questions they would like to shout out? Anything at all? Problems with your marriage? How to do your taxes? Stuff like that? No? Good. I'm also meant to ask, raise your hands. How many of you are here for the first time at a Cali conference? First time. Oh my gosh, 25, almost 20%. How many of you have been to at least 5 conferences? Oh my gosh, about 20%. How many of you have been to at least 10 conferences? About 25%. How many of you have been to more than 15? Wow, that's a pretty good spread. We've got more than 20. One, me and you, Ken, and maybe Elmer, or he's on 19 now. Oh, there we go, Mo. So our keynote today is Professor William Henderson. Oh, and don't forget to set your phones to vibrate. There we go. Our keynote today is Professor William Henderson. There he is, who is at Indiana University Bloomington Maurer School of Law. He's got so many titles, but the one I was looking for was I didn't write it down. I'll let you give your titles on that. So yesterday we heard about that the containers are not important. It's the content that you put in the containers, because in law schools the containers are all changing, right? Our classrooms are being flipped, our courses are being tweeted, our libraries are getting cloudy, and our books are becoming E'd. And so to bring a closer perspective to that and to hopefully give us a blueprint for change, I'd like to invite William Henderson to come speak with us. Walk around a while? Okay. You should do that.
Okay, and we'll put that on there. There's a walk around there.
Fancy. Thanks, John.
Let's do it on that side.
Great.
And they want me to turn it up.
Well, I can't tell you how grateful I am to have the opportunity to be here to give this lecture. I began my teaching career at Chicago-Kent College of Law in 2002. So all good things have flown from that, and it's just absolutely delightful to be back. So I really don't have a great title for this talk, just because it's the first time I've really concentrated on this particular topic, but I'm really incredibly grateful for the opportunity to think about this topic and hopefully get some feedback from the audience, because I think that these are some big ideas that are floating around. Derivative, I've derived them from other folks. So I want to start off with how many people have know about this book, or at least know Richard Susskind. Raise your hand if you know who said it. And you know what? I can't tell you how many times I've crossed the United States, and I'll get under 5% of the people that have ever heard of Richard Susskind here. We've set a record here that's well over 50% have heard of Richard Susskind. And I want to do something that's a little bit unusual for an academic. I want to just say, let's just listen to him. Let's not, let me not reinvent the wheel, so to speak. And let's just, Richard's been thinking about the future of the legal profession now for about 30 years. Richard Susskind is a technologist and futurist and a consultant and a law professor in the UK. And he's got a pretty good track record of being accurate. So what I want to suggest is Richard has got a few frames that he's put forward. Let's, for the purposes of conversation, let's rely on Richard's frames so we have the ability to communicate with one another. I think that he's earned the right to have his simple frames followed. This is his most recent book called Tomorrow's Lawyers. He's written other books. The previous one was The End of Lawyers, ? A lot of people interpret the end of lawyers to be a declarative statement. It's a question mark. And it's a question mark that's ambiguous. The title of the book, The End of Lawyers, what's the purpose of lawyers, I think was the question that he was asking. The purpose of lawyers is to facilitate the needs of clients and also to think about the civic republic and our role in democracies and to facilitate that and derivatively make a living. And the book was very provocative, but it was abstract. This book is very, very concrete, and we're living in an age. We got somebody who's a 20-year Cali participant. Somebody mentioned that it was his moment in the sun. Well, I think that he's going to have more than one moment in the sun because the world is changing pretty dramatically. I think we're moving toward a tipping point, and I totally commend this book. What I hope to do today is make it just a little bit more concrete. So Tomorrow's Lawyers, an introduction to your future. My students actually read this book. My 1L students in my legal professions class read this book, and we did a Cisco telepresence with Richard coming in, and they were asking questions of Richard. And one of the questions was, should I even bother going to a law firm? And he said yes, for a while. Anyway, well, it's there. So Richard has this quote at the beginning of the book, and I want to read it to you because I think it typifies a lot of the struggles that are going on in the legal profession today. And when I read it, I was particularly moved because I've lived through it. I've been called a crisis purveyor. I'm a person who's conveying the crisis that's in the legal profession. Some people think it's exaggerated, but I read this book, I read this quote, and I thought, well, this is apropos. When one door closes, another door opens, but we often look so long and so regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the ones which open for us. Does anybody know where that quote comes from? Alexander Graham Bell. Okay, so this idea of disruption goes back 100 years or so. So Richard quotes that at the beginning of his book, and then the quote underneath it from Clay Shirky is, institutions will try to preserve the problem to which they are the solution. So, and I think about that, about law schools, so a little bit. So we have a door that's opening, and I'm in the process now of writing an article for the ABA Journal that's trying to, and actually we're going to make a documentary film for a shoestring budget. Dan Katz and Michael Bassone from Law Without Walls. We've decided to do some footage of these people that are flipping open the door, and hopefully give you a little bit of optimism, and especially optimism if you're in the legal industry in Chicago. This is a great place to retool. If you're out in the country somewhere like I am, you got to get on a plane, you got to go drive to retool, or you got to get online to retool. But here you got the whole city in your backyard. So the first frame I want to start with, this is from Richard's book, The End of Lawyers, but it reappears in Tomorrow's Lawyers. And what he's saying is that there's a continuum that and I'm going to see if I'll walk around here a little bit. There's a continuum by which pretty much all things move pertaining to goods and services, but this specifically for legal work, he's suggesting that we move from bespoke to standardized, to systematized, to packaged, to commoditized. And what everyone is worried about, if you're a lawyer, is that why don't we stay as close to bespoke as possible because it's what we're familiar with. But all of society is pulling us in the direction. I'll give you an example of communication. We used to have messenger boys that would carry messages to communicate or coach carriers or things like that. And now we have phones and everybody, and this has solved the communication problem. It's democratized education, this cell phone or smartphone, and it's definitely moved almost to the commodity edge. Now Apple tries to stay a little bit ahead of commoditized, but I mean, we're moving toward commodity, and this helps society because it makes goods and services cheaper. So Richard, and everybody knows we have standardized legal forms. We've had that for a while. Systematized would be something like you take, say, an estate plan, and you plug it into the IRS code, and you have a bunch of decision trees and template-driven questions. You answer those questions, and out the other end comes a estate plan, fairly sophisticated. Now, even the white shoe firms in New York have invested in some of these things, the ones that still have trusted estates practices. So that's a pretty clear example of a systematized approach. Package might be a compliance program having to do with a European or Australian or U.S. or some other governmental body that announces some law change, and we want to have a compliance program, and we can package this together in a way where it can be sold over and over again. Now, what we worry about as lawyers is we worry about free over the internet, commoditized. We can't make any money doing that, but what Richard is saying is the sweet spot is right here between systematized and packaged, because you can, quote unquote, make money while you sleep. So we'll talk about a metaphor to make this a little bit more concrete, but he's saying this is the spot where entrepreneurs want to be if they want to succeed and prosper. This is lawyers' comfort zone because we've got centuries of tradition being right here, and this is where it's free over the internet. So it's you have to find your place kind of right here. But you can see standardized. I mean, we've had standardized forms for decades now. So here's another framework that Richard uses that I think is particularly useful. He talks about the stages of this market moving from bespoke to commoditized, moving from stage one, denial. We deny that it's happening at all. Stage two, which is resourcing, because that there's different ways to have the work performed, and we allocate it to different service providers. And then there's true disruption, where things, where fundamentally work goes away and new ways of performing the work get done, oftentimes with the benefit of automation and machines. And this drives down the cost dramatically. And the good news is that it increases the demand for law. A lot of people have thought about maybe law becoming a mature industry, and so law is going to go away. I think that that's the exact opposite, wrong analysis. I think that law is so important that we just can't afford to pay for it on a time and materials artisan model anymore. And so that we're facing a productivity imperative. Even the richest corporations are squealing at the high cost of legal services, and almost 90% of the public just can't afford to access artisan-type legal services at all. So we have this latent demand that I think is going to have the possibility of getting re-tapped once we move to stage three. But Richard says pretty firmly that we're still very much in denial. So we're in the denial stage as a profession, and he would wrap in there legal educators in that mix. Now, this is my one contribution, mildly original thought to Richard's analysis. I want to use the term artisan lawyer because I think it captures that bespoke ethos that's at the beginning of his continuum. When we think about an artisan lawyer that takes a legal problem, frames it out, analyzes it, puts together a solution, talks to other folks, proceeds it through to a resolution. And what Richard is saying, he divides the familiar lawyers of the analogs that have some resemblance to the current frame. He divides it into two. He talks about the expert trusted advisor that's the most like the lawyers that are working over on LaSalle Street and on the near north, just to the east of us. So the expert trusted advisor, they work in skyscrapers, they have large clients, they're still doing bespoke work, they're crafting expert solutions to novel, complex legal problems. And then he also talks about the enhanced practitioner. It's still very much a lawyer, but it's a lawyer that has this broader view of how work can be performed, and it's a little bit more of like a general contractor. They understand the landscape and just say, well, this should be done by this person, this should be done by that person, I can do this myself, and this could be done by this particular company, and they can efficiently source the legal services. Now, the enhanced practitioner wouldn't be of the same status as the expert trusted advisor, but all of society has an interest in reducing the need for bespoke legal services, because that drives down the absolute cost, potentially drives up quality. All right, so I want to use the term the artisan lawyer. Now, this is a very complicated graph, and we're going to come back to this one, but I just want you to take 2 points from this. So what Richard is saying is tomorrow's employers are going to be, the law firms of today, we would naturally look to them because they're at the top of the market to be the market leaders, because we have decades of them being the market leaders. They have the smartest, best credentialed lawyers, so we would think that they would be the folks that would determine our future. But in fact, they're ill-prepared to make this switch because they're cursed with decades of success, and they have a very difficult time breaking out of that frame, and to a certain extent, their business opportunity is cannibalizing their legacy business. And there's a whole literature in the business schools regarding employers or companies being reluctant to cannibalize their legacy products. See Kodak. Was Kodak in the chemical film industry, or were they in the memory business? They kind of got it wrong when they prospered. All of Rochester, New York was built upon chemical film, but in fact they were built upon memories, and they got it wrong. It was very difficult to make that switch, and we see that again and again and again in many industries. But Richard is talking about setting aside law firms which will exist into the future, but other employers are going to rise in prominence, and to a certain extent the hierarchy is going to get reordered. He predicts the comeback of the global accounting firms, major legal publishers, Lexis, Wolters Kluwer might be in the hunt there, Thomson Reuters, ALM, things like that. Legal know-how providers, because we're going to be doing things differently. So the folks that actually know how to redo the work. Legal process outsourcers, there's a booming sector of LPOs. Legal leasing agencies, folks that have specialized legal talent that they can lease on demand rather than own that capacity and all the burdens thereof. You can actually lease it. Axiom would be a good example of that. New look law firms, there's a few here in Chicago. Valorum would be a new look law firm that's gotten a lot of favorable press. Online service providers that take away all the logistics of dealing with, of actually going and visiting an office, the intimidation of visiting an office. A lot of people are willing to go to a website when they're not willing to go to a bricks and mortar location. And legal management consultants, and this is the blurring of lines between law and other disciplines. Now I'm going to hold in abeyance the new jobs for lawyers, because I want to give you a flavor and make it a little bit more concrete before we dive into what those 8 categories are. By the way, I left one of tomorrow's employers off. It's high street retailers. Why did I leave it off? Because here in the United States, we don't have the benefit of alternative business structures, and so we can't have non-lawyer investing. So if we had non-lawyer investing, then Tesco or insurance companies or banks might offer legal services. That's the high street retailers that Richard thinks will come into and will be the flora of the future. So I'm searching for a useful metaphor to describe what we're about to go through. And I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, which is an industrial city. I lived in Cleveland, Ohio during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I remember how the automobile industry led to the prosperity of the region. I was there when I was just coming of age, becoming a young adult, when we hit the 1981 recession. It crushed a lot of the legal jobs. A lot of my friends' parents lost their jobs. They were managers or blue-collar workers. And the region, there was the sense that the region would rebound, and that our fate was tied to the automotive industry, and it never really rebound. And Cleveland, it's not in as bad a shape as Detroit, but has never really fully recovered from it, and looking for a new way to kind of repurpose itself. So I want to use the automotive industry, and I want to go back to this idea of the artisan lawyer. Think about the idea of having a carriage and an automobile, and if I put the two together, well, I can get rid of the horse, and I can go a lot farther, and I can go a lot faster. Wouldn't this be great? And a lot of people had this idea, and they wanted to have these horseless carriages, and the horseless carriage industry was taking off at the end of the 18th or 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. So I just want to show you a couple of pictures of the automotive, or from automotive employer or automotive manufacturers circa 1905, 1900. So here's the Acme Motor Car Company from Reading, Pennsylvania. There really was a company called the Acme Motor Car, and here was an advertisement for its wares. Okay, here's the premier the quality car. This is from Indianapolis. Indianapolis had a history of being involved in the automotive industry. To a certain extent, that explains the Indianapolis 500. So this is another manufacturer. This is from April 22nd, 1905. Okay, here's the Cleveland from Cleveland, Ohio. So we had our own car. Have anybody heard of the Cleveland Automobile Company? Okay, it's not around anymore. Okay, here's the Iroquois Standard for Quality. This is in Seneca Falls, New York. It was formed in 1903. It was out of business by 1907. Okay, good idea, right? You know, having an automobile, wouldn't it be great to have an automobile? It was a good idea, but a lot of people were having this good idea at the same time, and you can see the schedule for the different luxuries you could get and the souped up horsepower. Okay, the Pierce Aero cars, and this is from Buffalo, New York, and you can see that it has some nice branding associated with it and different cylinders and this and that. Has anybody heard of the George N. Pierce Company? You've heard of it, but how Pierce went in for a few more decades, right? A little bit longer. So the Cameron from 1904. This is from Pawtucket, Rhode Island. We don't associate the automotive industry with Rhode Island, but here we had the United Motor Company, or the selling agents for the Cameron. Okay, the Studebaker. The Studebaker had a long run. If you've ever been to South Bend, Indiana, to go to Notre Dame, you'll see some Studebaker wares, but Studebaker went out of business a few decades ago, went into bankruptcy, but had a pretty good run, but only lasted for about a half a century. Okay, the Reliance from Detroit. So we associate the automotive industry with Detroit, but here the Reliance didn't really last for very long. But you can see that it had this idea of making these manufacturers. The reason this is the last slide I'm going to show you in the automotive industry. In 1905, there was 125 auto companies making automobiles in Detroit. So everybody was having these good ideas, but they were all making them as artisans. And so wouldn't it be great if you could drive up the quality, you could drive down the cost, you could increase demand. And so somebody had to come up with this idea of just say, buy my car. Because if I was buying one of these cars, I would worry, well, are they going to be around? Can I get parts for them? I mean, this is kind of expensive. This is probably $3,000 or $4,000. It's a big investment. I want to buy an automobile where it's going to be around a long period of time. So the importance of brand and credibility and reliability comes to the fore, because you're making a trust decision when you cast your lot with one of these automobile manufacturers. And I think that's, to a certain extent, is very true with some of these legal vendors I'm going to talk to you today. Are they going to be around in 5 years? Because these are expensive to switch to some of these new systems that appear to be so promising. Okay, so here's the production of the Ford Model A. All right, looks like a pretty good car. It's been standardized. We're driving down costs. We're driving up quality. And so Ford kind of moves away from the pack, sets the standard. People begin to copy his production methods, but he's taking huge market share, and he's competing with some formidable competitors. And so what I'll be as explicit as I can be. I think we're at that moment right now where lots and lots of people have lots and lots of good ideas. I'm going to show you some examples from the New York Legal Tech Show. But this is all going to get rolled up, because we'd like to have some standardization. We'd like to have some belief that what we're using today, we can communicate with our clients with. It won't be obsolete in 5 years from now. So we would like to move towards something that we know is a good long-term investment as we invest our human capital. But we're about to tip into something big. Okay, so go back to this idea, the artisan lawyer and the expert trusted advisor and the enhanced practitioner. With the idea the enhanced practitioner is going to be somebody who is more familiar with these methods of production, this know-how, to source legal work in a way that drives up quality, it drives down costs, and drives down production time. So I just go back and remind you of this graph. And I want to talk about these jobs here, but I want to do it after I show you some examples here. So Oliver Goodenough is sitting in the second row right here. He wrote for the symposium that Ron Stout was farsighted enough to get the brick published for when we had this event. Everything's ready to go, and I actually have a copy of the book. And I read Oliver's essay, and there's lots of things that jump out about his essay, but there's a line in there, this is legal work, and he's talking about being at Legal Tech in January of 2013, and kind of thinking that this is different than the other legal techs that he had been to in the past. He's walking to the floor and he's thinking, these aren't ancillary support services, they're replacing what lawyers have done for a long period of time. All right, so being the industrious person that I am, I took out my smartphone and I took a picture of the vendor list, all right? And I asked myself, who are these companies? And there's only a handful of us professors that are even at the conference. I mean, a few of the folks in this room, and that's about it. And so we're kind of off in the wilderness by ourselves saying, well, this seems relevant, but there's no other law professors here. So what did I do? One of the beauties of being a professor at a law school is you can hand this to somebody else and to some students and just say, look up every one of these companies on the internet, find some databases and give me some, and let me know who these companies are. Let's do some counting. So if you think about the legal realist movement of the 1930s, one of the sneering comments that went after the legal realists, all they do is just count. So what am I doing in the year 2013? I'm counting. I'm counting who these companies are, and I'm categorizing them. So let's just engage in a counting exercise. So just like the legal realists that were doing the accounting in the 1930s, here's some of the stuff that I did. Of the 227 exhibitors, 81% are privately held, 19% are publicly held, and 1% are nonprofits. Well, this is a little bit unusual because if they're doing legal work, Rule 5.4 of the Model Rules of Professional Responsibility forbid fee splitting, so you wouldn't think they could be publicly held because publicly held means that anybody can own a share of stock in them. It turns out that if you look at who owns the privately held ones, there's tons of non-lawyers in there. As a matter of fact, there's probably more non-lawyers in there than there are lawyers, but you have work that's being done. Now, I think this may be obvious. I hope that it is. But everything up to the courthouse door, the client counseling moment, is fair game to be disaggregated and sourced to a non-lawyer provider. Even business getting has now been disaggregated. Companies like Axiom and ClearSpire that appear to be doing legal work actually disaggregate these things, and through clever corporate structures are able to outsource or have parts of the company, divisions of the company, do business getting, managed services, all these kind of things with these design elements, knowledge management, that to a large extent are making enormous contributions to the legal field, but they're not being performed by lawyers, and they've gotten around the fee splitting rule. Okay, offerings. This is interesting because Richard talks about products a lot. He talks about moving away from services and more toward products. So we categorize these things, 35% services, 49% products. And I'll talk about what those products are, and then 13% both. So that's kind of interesting. Employees, the average is 10,733. Why? Because IBM's in there, Price Waterhouse is in there, some really big employers, but everyone knows that when the average and the median are going to be different when you don't have a normal distribution. And so we do have some smaller companies, and the median is 125. So these aren't, although there's a few in there that have 2 or 5 employees. True startups there buying exhibitor space in New York legal tech, but you have some pretty substantial companies out there. And you look at their geographic footprint, 12% of them are from outside the United States. They're from Sydney, Australia, or from Israel, or from the Philippines, or from India, all over the globe. I think there was one company in there from South America. By the way, I have this in a spreadsheet. I'll give you the whole spreadsheet. So let's be open source about this stuff. So I'll send you this list, and you can do some tabulations, and so we can get moving on what this sector means. And 2/3 have foreign locations. So already this is a very globalized industry. So I'm trying to make this a little bit more concrete. I'm going to give you a concrete example, but I thought that this exercise was particularly useful to say who's at Legal Tech, and they're selling products. And so I think this next slide will make it a little bit more clear. So their target clients are 1% law firms, 1% legal departments, 90% both, and then 8% law firms, legal departments, and government agencies. So, this is kind of worth kind of thinking about this next one. And 59% are making software. All right, that's kind of interesting if you think about it. Now, if you think about the traditional model of law firms, and I know lots of these, I've met lots of these legal entrepreneurs along the way. Their frustration is they go and they talk to law firms and they say, we've got a way to do your legal work a lot more efficiently. And the law firm is scratching their head and they're thinking, well, we bill by the hour. We don't really want to do things more efficiently, and we don't know how to price it. We don't know how to have a conversation with our legal departments to pay for this switching, because there's a huge amount of switching costs. And so who's going to pay for this transition? And so I've talked to a lot of these legal entrepreneurs, and I'll give you a couple of examples of two legal process outsourcers that had definitely a technology-driven, better way to do e-discovery. And they went to 100 law firms. You know how many jobs they sold to the law firms? 0. And they just decided that they couldn't go. On the one hand, it makes sense that you can go to somebody, we've got a better way to do your core business. Buy the software, you'll get some multiple, you'll be much more efficient. So, well, then we got to go tell our clients that we're in a different business and we got to figure out a different way to price. Until the clients want it, we don't really want to switch. They don't say that with words, but they say it through their behavior. How this is beginning to take hold is you have legal departments that are squealing uncle and just saying we have to have a better way to do this. These vendors are developing relationships with the legal departments, and the legal departments are saying, if you want to be on our panel of providers, you have to use this software. You have to use this software or we're not going to include you anymore. And I'll give you an example of it that's right in everybody's backyard here. So here's an example of this one. And here, it'll be a little bit more fun if I tell you the story of how I found out about these things. These are serendipities. This is the power of a network. And so I have a friend of mine that's the co-chair of a law firm that has an office over in the Loop. It's definitely the top 10, if not the top 5 most profitable, most prestigious law firms in the world. It's a brand name that instantly you would recognize if I just said the first word of its name. And the co-chair of the corporate department, who lives here in Chicago, was going to buy some expensive art from somebody that he patronizes. And he's in the art gallery with this artist that he buys lots of expensive art from. And there's another guy there that's friends with the artist that actually started his business at the same, about almost 15 years ago, 13 years ago, and became friendly with this artist, and he's friendly with this artist. And now this guy can afford to buy expensive art from his artist friend. So two business people, one lawyer, one legal service vendor is in there, and they both can afford to buy expensive art. Okay, that's all I'll say about that. So they find out that there's a company out there called Keynote, which is located over here in the Chicago in the Loop area. And so this is a company you'll see this lots and lots in the legal tech space, is you'll see trademarked software. They want the software to have its own identity, and then the software manufacturer, you have to look a little bit, but Keynote is the actual company that makes Relativity. And Relativity is a product. It's a workflow product for doing e-discovery type work that's got predictive coding embedded in it, as best as I can tell, and plays well with other software that allows to do high-end human review, because eventually when you're doing this workflow and you're going through these documents, it has to be looked through by humans, and there's some other software that plays nicely with it. But Keynote is the software company that actually makes Relativity. And so you can just see, well, there's going to be a Relativity Fest in Chicago. I urge you all to go to this free Relativity Fest in Chicago from the 6th to the 8th here. Registration is now open. By the way, Timemetrics is another company that does these free open houses. They're fun. You learn a lot about it, but they're trying to get people to switch over to their products here. So buy my Reliance or buy my Cameron automobile. You know, we have that kind of getting people to dip in here. I hadn't heard of Relativity or Keycura until a few weeks ago. They're actually in the New York Legal Tech database, but I hadn't heard about them. So it's got a nice, attractive web page. I think that this is the guy that my friend met. The company is prospering. It looks to be. So working with partners. So Keycura has a dedicated global network of partners offering Relativity on a case-by-case basis to corporations, law firms, government agencies. So this is one of the ones that's pitching to everybody. Okay, if you're considering Relativity for your next litigation project, it's important to understand how Keycura works with Relativity partners to ensure a positive end user experience. Now, Keycura only works in the legal industry. A lot of the folks that legal tech have offerings where they supply to other professional services, banks, accounting firms, etc. Keycura is exclusively in the legal business, and they're pitching to law firms, legal departments, and government agencies. By the way, my friend, his firm is a client of Keycura. So they buy Keycura and Relativity. He realized that after the fact. Why did they do it? Because their client said, you have to use this or we're not going to give you any litigation work. That's how this big law firm ended up becoming a Keycura Relativity client. So here's another kind of interesting thing. So premium hosting partners, when you do this kind of Relativity cloud-based service, you're talking about terabyte after terabyte after terabyte of data. So you need to have a commercial vendor that's secure, that meets privacy needs, that hosts a Relativity for you. And so they don't do that work, and they say, who we are. Keycura is a software company dedicated to the development and support of Relativity. We do not offer professional services such as project management or direct-to-market hosting. Here's the folks that they refer to for direct-to-market hosting. The consulting partners will actually do some training, but this company is entirely dedicated toward making the software that hopefully will be, from their perspective, the next standard. So let's look at the website a little bit further here. Okay, there's their clients. There's the Department of Justice. Thompson Knight's a big law firm. Shepard Mullins is a big law firm. Foley Hoag is a big law firm in Boston. By the way, this rolls through, and so you'll see other ones. I just took the screenshot when it was just plain those clients, but they have lots more clients than that. And it's a nice, clean web page. And they're over on LaSalle Street, so kind of back to the beginning. This is LaSalle Street's associated with the legal industry. So 231 South LaSalle Street, just right around the corner from here. So here's their Help Wanted page. Full-time professional jobs in Chicago in the legal industry. They just don't look anything like what an artisan lawyer does. So you have the VM Senior Systems Engineer, the QA software engineer for performance, the desktop support technician, the graphic designer, the API technical writer, the business analyst, the business specialist, the product manager, the manager and software engineer. You can read down. And by the way, I couldn't get it all on the screen, so they keep on going a little bit further after that. Now, don't you think that you could do these jobs better if you had domain knowledge on the legal industry, if you had gone to law school, right? You could do this job better. It would be more valuable to this particular company. But these are full, so the legal industry apparently doesn't have any jobs anymore. It's going flat, unless you're working for a company like this, where they're hiring in Chicago like great gangbusters. By the way, one of my RAs, she went through and she took screenshots of all these companies that look interesting, and we had the Help Wanted pages. So if anybody wants to see the whole deck of 119 slides that have Help Wanted for some of these new legal vendors, I mean, the legal business is booming. It's just not booming in the artisan model. So, and I bet you some of these people will end up being lawyers. We need to go talk to this guy to find out if he's hiring any lawyers, see if he wants to hire any Chicago Kent grads. So consulting partners here. So here's the consulting partners. So this is worth paying a little bit of attention to. So one of their consulting partners is a lawyer. So Joseph Decker, Esquire. So we should talk to him. We talk to a lawyer if we want to work with a consulting partner of Relativity. So BIT XBit LLC is a highly successful company of certified computer examiners and highly skilled lawyers providing e-discovery and computer forensic services around the country to companies and law firms of all sizes, including the AmLaw 100, founded in 2007, exclusively endorsed by the Allegheny County, it's the Pittsburgh County Bar Association since 2008, and it goes on to describe it. Blank LT, now let's read what it says about that, is an information security law firm with a distinctly digital bent based upon historic Pioneer Square, District of Seattle, Washington, et cetera, et cetera. Our attorneys built their reputation as litigators by developing sound and aggressive strategies to identify and protect intellectual property and trade secrets. So it seems like we're tipping into a new kind of legal services that has this hybrid approach where boundaries are starting to break down. So before I leave that, I'm going to show you one more Chicago company. But before I do that, I want to just bring your attention to one thing that Oliver talks about in his law review article that I think is telling for legal education. So Oliver, being the shrewd guy that he is, negotiates with the ALM folks and gets a floor pass for 8 of his students for $900 and some odd, which typically one floor pass is $1,000. So 8 students from Vermont Law School trundled down to the New York Legal Tech in January, and they're just walking the floor of the trade show, doing what Oliver tells them to do, and 3 of them get job interviews, and 1 so far has gotten a job from a trade show. This is not a job fair, from a trade show. So something is happening here where that domain knowledge turns out to be particularly valuable, and this is just Oliver and I just following off a log, and our students are getting jobs. I'll give you an example of my students getting jobs. So there's another company here called Novus Law in Chicago. I'll just give you the brief background on what Novus Law is. Novus Law does high-end document review, digital document review for litigation, for investigations, for due diligence for large corporate transactions. And they came to my class to do, I was teaching project management in 2010, and Carol Silver, who's a lawyer here in town, she was a professor at Northwestern, and then she came over to Indiana, and she's got a long history of being in the Chicago bar. And her husband's a big firm lawyer. Said she networked in Chicago and found Ray Bailey and Lois Hambold, who are the founders of it. They're 2 MBAs who used to work for Price Waterhouse Coopers in their business processing division, and Ray was on the executive committee of PwC. And so he was the head of the division that did business process design. And so his division was going to get sold to IBM. He didn't want to go. So he and Lois spun out and started taking over non-core divisions of large companies. When a division that's not profitable is going to get spun out, people are going to lose their jobs. And so their core expertise was redesigning the workflow so the company was more efficient, so it was more attractive to suitors and nobody had to lose their jobs. The company became more profitable, more efficient because they were experts at redesigning workflows. And so in 2004, they were looking for a place to put their money, and they got in touch with some industry data that said law firm clients want X. Law firms are willing to offer Y. And there was this huge delta between the two. She said, my God, we can redo workflow for legal work, and we can make it much more efficient, and we can actually capture this big delta between what clients want and what law firms are able to provide. Remember, law firms, they get paid by the hour. In this company, Novus Law, they call it the measure of certainty. They price everything by the terabyte and guarantee you delivery within a day. Okay, we'll have this project done 36 days from now, all 70 terabytes. And we'll reduce it down to 10 pages of a story. You can make a business decision. So this is some of the graphics that they're using. Now, they came to my class. I had never seen anything like this before. I said, this is really project management. Wow, I was really blown away by it. By the way, these right here are actual people doing legal work where they're showing on one dimension speed and on the other dimension quality, and volume is measured here. And I think that the different colors are men versus women, and this is, or they might be India versus the United States. Very interesting stuff. This is the learning curve, where they're going up the learning curve, and they get the learning curve, and then they get that's their measures of quality. All sorts of cool stuff that they're doing there. So They're growing very quickly. One of their biggest clients is an insurance company, probably one of the 50 largest companies in the world. And insurance companies are in the business of litigation, so they just love this stuff. And they love the fact that all this stuff is put at their fingertips so they can manage their litigation much more effectively. Well, they're growing and they need to employ new people. So 2 of my students got jobs with Novus Law. It pays well above the median salary. I'm not at liberty to tell you how much they're making, but almost any law school graduate would be happy to make what they're making. It's well above the median of $72,000 for law school, or the average for law school graduates. They have the possibility of owning part of the firm. Now, remember, is it a law firm? No, it's not a law firm. They're doing components of a legal supply chain, but they're not doing client counseling. They're not doing courthouse advocacy work. 2 of my students, and why did they get their jobs? One of them because he worked for Toyota and he had Six Sigma training, and he had gone abroad and he had learned Japanese, and he had been to India, and he got an MBA from a Korean law or business school that Indiana has a relationship with. He's in the bottom half of his class. They hired him for his skill. They hired him for his experience. He's smart enough to get through law school. They didn't care about his grades. My other student, Joanna, she had gone to China to teach English as a second language, and she had done business-to-business marketing. So she was an excellent writer, an excellent communicator. She had 5 years worth of work experience. Again, average student. They didn't care about her grades. They cared about her experience and skills. So they take her legal domain knowledge and they combine it with the skill set she had. She said, we have a place for you in this company, and it pays above average legal work. And so I'll tell you the last story that's related to this. There's a law lab called Reinvent Law at Michigan State over in East Lansing, run by a guy named Dan Katz. And so Katz has put together a suite of programs, or of courses that are right in Novus Law's wheelhouse. So Ray Bailey goes over there and he sees what's going on in the lab, and he says, if you guys continue to teach this, I will come here every year and I will recruit from this lab. So Dan Katz, who used to be a Division I football player when he was 18 years old, thinks about recruiting students that are STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, get them into his laboratory, and he can place all 30 of those students. And Ray will come and he'll hire them, and Dan is busy learning who all these vendors are at the Legal Tech Show. I think he was the only person at Legal Tech, the only academic who had a speaking part this year. So Dan is building basically what looks like a government-type laboratory that's portable, that's going to place law school graduates into this burgeoning tech field. 30 graduates a year. I think he's going to make a name for himself in the years to come. But this is exciting. This is the door that's opening. These are high-paid, sophisticated jobs that are about to hit their elbow. They're growing, and they're going to go like this. And if you get in before the elbow, this is going to be like Silicon Valley. These are in Chicago, and I can give you the list. There's other companies that are in Chicago. We need to know these folks because they're a huge part of the legal supply chain. So I'm going to end with this. I just want to briefly touch upon what Richard is talking about when he talks about his new jobs for lawyers. The legal knowledge engineers is domain knowledge. We need to know law. The best lawyers need to participate in making these expert systems. Domain knowledge really matters because you're trying to solve a multiplicity of legal problems rather than customizing a solution to just one. We need huge domain expertise to do this. The legal technologist is the person that has a mastery. This would be John Mayer, somebody who has a mastery over legal technology that knows how the two fit together. The legal hybrid is law and finance, law and psychology, law and some other discipline. A credible expertise in the other discipline. This is what Richard is talking about. The legal process analyst is somebody who actually does the sequencing, breaks things down, does some systems engineering work. This is the workflow to get the work done efficiently with high quality, low cycle time. This is a design job. The legal project manager is the person that actually monitors the assembly line, going back to the automotive metaphor that I started with. The ODR is online dispute resolution practitioner. This is democratizing disputes because most people can't afford to go to court to get their disputes resolved, and online may be able to take care of that. The legal management consultant is the know-how folks. The folks, if you go back up to the legal know-how providers, those are the folks that are going to capture together the legal know-how and disseminate it throughout the industry. And then the legal risk manager, Richard has a wonderful slide. I wish I could get access to it. But just imagine this: you have a cliff with a fence, and at the bottom, and the fence is broken through, and at the bottom is an ambulance. And you say, wouldn't it be great to have a fence that actually kept you from falling over the cliff, rather than having to buy insurance for the ambulance purveyor? And so risk managers will keep us from falling off the cliff, and they actually having to engage in a very expensive dispute resolution. So who is training these lawyers? So this is the last thing I want to bring to your attention. Has anybody ever heard of Bryan University? You know what Bryan University is? It was founded in 1940 in Los Angeles. It was a legal stenographer school. So it was a vocational school, and then they added some associate degrees, and then they eventually got accredited as a college, and then they offered associate degrees instead of a vocational school. And now they have two masters. They have a master's in health informatics that's online 100%, and then a certificate in e-discovery. It's a graduate level e-discovery thing. So on my blog, The Legal Whiteboard, this came to my attention. I have some Google alert, and it showed up on a Google alert, and I went and I checked it out here. And it's taught by practitioners. It's taught by a lot of these vendors. $1,400 for 4 weeks, 8 hours a day, live over the internet. And you get to go deep into. You get to use these legal vendors, like Relativity is offered on this platform. A few other vendors on there are donating software, and you have some expertise in actually learning how to use this technology with simulations. $1,400. If you multiplied this out and you did all the law school curriculum this way, it'd be $15,000 a year, roughly $15,000 a year, to have a completely, I hate to say it, but I mean there's an element of vocationalism involved here, but it's the hands-on domain knowledge that you need to actually know how this stuff fits together, and it's being offered by functionally what began life as a trade school. So if I had to, and so I wanted to spend some time framing out the issues. I have some ideas of what we should do next, but it's pretty darn simple. Let's invite these people to lunch. Let's go to lunch with the people at Relativity. Let's just find out what they're doing and find out what they're hiring, what their legal needs are. Let's go to lunch with the Novus Law folks. Let's ask them to visit our classroom. Let's maybe do some intersession courses where we have a course on e-discovery that maybe is maybe 1 credit hours that we do over 3 days, and let's just build from there. Let's just pack the snowball. Let's roll it downhill. Let's see how big that it gets. We got to collaborate with these folks, because this is really, we're moving from artisan to industrial. And we don't have expertise in this industrial methodology, but we can learn it. We're smart people, and we have a self-interest in doing it. Last thing is the same thing that's happening in law is going to happen in legal education. We're going to have people that design excellent content. And instead of me making my bespoke corporations class or my bespoke legal professions class, I'm gonna be probably given 2 years to design the absolute best course. It's going to be quality checked, and then it's going to be sold over and over again. And there's going to be people that are experts at actually delivering it to the classroom to make it very experiential, and that'll be the new model. It'll be better, it'll be cheaper, it'll be faster, and it'll be more enjoyable for the students. I just can't see how we won't go down that road, but it will mean that this existing hierarchy that's very credentials-based, I think, is going to be swept away. Remember, when Ray Bailey hired the guy from Michigan State sent over his transcript with his grades. He happened to have pretty good grades. Ray Bailey laughed. He said, "I could care less about your grades. I hired you because you know how to write code and you have a passion for innovation, and you were smart enough to get through law school." He just laughed at the idea that law school grades mattered. And so if law school grades matter, these new legal entrepreneurs will measure it, and they'll require high grades. If it doesn't matter and some other know-how matters, they'll measure that, and that's what they'll expect from law schools that prosper. So I hope I didn't drone on too long, but I'd love if to maybe take some questions. So you can tell me if I'm all wet, too.
So here's why it won't happen. Law faculty won't let it happen, except you. You're the only one I've ever heard say something.
Well, me and Ron and Oliver and Dan Katz are going to get together over the summer. We're going to do something subversive. I think that's probably how it's going to happen. So, yeah. Yeah, great question. There's the, and I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but there's an institute in Colorado that happens to be based at the University of Denver that thinks about these issues all the time and thinking about redoing the civil justice system. There's at least 3 states out there that are now trying to take out family law disputes and make it non-adversarial and make it more collaborative. And so it's institutional redesign. There's no doubt about that part of facilitating this transition is going to be courts thinking to themselves, we're underserving individuals. We need to make the system more user-friendly. We need to, and the vendors here are pitching to government and just say, the governments that are under fiscal pressure say, hey, how about if we put this system in place that'll drive down your costs and drive up access to your citizenry? And so academics can participate in this institutional redesign. It's happening already at the biggest pain points, which is family law. You go into a typical family law court in New York, 85-90% of the people are going to be pro se because they can't afford an artisan lawyer. And so this is. It's really incredible to think about building new institutions from the ground up, but I think that it's going to happen over the next couple of decades, and I think law professors have a huge, people in the legal education business, broadly construed, the librarians, the staff. I mean, I think that this is a huge opportunity to do something special. Yes, sir.
I'm struck by the fact law schools currently suggesting that we train more legal technicians, which is great. But what about training the people who can represent those 90% of the people who are out there using some of these resources? What can law schools do to prevent people who can actually train folks who will be providing those legal services?
Yeah. I think that that's a challenging and good question. I'm not for throwing out traditional legal education right now. I think we need to change it through what's the word here, incrementally. But if we proceed down that path incrementally but deliberately, I think that those law schools are going to prosper. Richard talks about if he's advising young people, he said go get traditional legal training, go to law school. Get on with a traditional employer, learn that domain knowledge, but if your employer isn't viewing the future realistically, then look for one of these either start one of these businesses yourself or join one of these businesses that seems to understand the way the future is going. I think that we have a huge problem here because I need to retool before I can teach. And so so part of it is just, I've done what the social legal field sometimes calls soak and poke. I just show up at these industry events and I pay attention. And I try and get these people to go talk to me for lunch or go visit where they're at and begin to look for some sort of patterns or some sort of framework in another discipline where I can build a course out. I taught project management and the students found it was very well received. It wasn't that hard to teach. But still, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think that John referred to my blueprint for change. I have a thing in there where I talk about 12% of the faculty committing themselves to retooling. We just can't tolerate more than 12% of something new at one time. So who wants to retool? Who wants to go to lunch with these new legal entrepreneurs? Who wants to build some of these new suites? But I'm not proposing anything super radical. I mean, I'm proposing something deliberate and something incremental, but definitely deliberate and definitely focused. I'm not sure if I answered your question, though, to be honest with you. Paul.
What's your impression of some law schools like Emory and San Diego and others performing a 1-year master's in law, designed for strong lawyers who think that underexposure to law will help them in career prospects? And I'm wondering, I have a son that just graduated from MA as an advocate.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at the opportunity you have with advocating. And I'm wondering, is there any sort of hope for bosses to say to the STEM majors out there?
Yeah.
Would it make sense to take advantage of one of these 1-year kind of master's
Yeah.
laws?
Yeah.
Bridge into the
Yeah.
lawyers who would take into
So my point number one is, why don't we go to lunch with a guy from Relativity and we'll ask him that question. How about, would you buy a year, would you take some of these architects and project managers and they come to Chicago Kent for a year and we'll design a curriculum where they'll get enough domain knowledge to do their job better. So that would be point. Let's ask that guy if he's willing to do it, because it's like an MBA thing. Well, we need people that can do finance, marketing, and I remember when I was in Cleveland at Case Western Reserve, all these companies kept the MBA program at Case busy because they wanted those skills for their people. And so I would just go and I would try and assess the demand by talking to people that are in this space. That's point number one. Point number two, I got to tell another Oliver Goodenough story just very quickly. So Oliver comes to my class, my legal professions class. I gave him the whole class to himself here, and he's an outsider, he's a prophet, and so the students are willing to be dazzled by him. And he came back from New York Legal Tech and told a great story, and he mentions Dan Katz's work, and this student comes up afterwards. He says, Professor Goodenough, that was an incredibly interesting. Oliver frightened 50% of my class and brought alive the other 50%. But the students that were frightened got over it in 2 days because he gave the view here. But one of the students said, "Hey, I got recruited by Dan Katz." And this guy was a STEM major, and he had done logistics at Chiquita Banana. And so he was like the perfect person for this new legal emergency. So I said, Tyler, I said, you're a smart guy and you're going to do great with your law degree. But boy, that logistics supply chain analysis, you're going to have the world as your oyster. And he knew after hearing Oliver's talk and the fact that Dan Katz had recruited him, that he had a bright future. And he said, don't worry, and he was grateful the fact that he was able to triangulate me, Oliver, and Dan Katz, and realize, and we were reading Susskind's book, and so realizing that the world's his oyster. So I think that the answer to that, Paul, is probably, if we repurpose what we do so it has a pull from the private sector, I think the answer to that would be a one-year vocational training, or one-year professional training could be very, very excellent. And so it might be the wave of the future with the STEM people, the STEM folks.
Time for one more question. Comment?
Comments, you can.
Rotten fruit?
There you go.
Accolades?
Thank you. Utter pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.
Forget to kill your mic.
Sure.
We're live.